Hello, everybody, and welcome to our RV Lifestyle and Repair Club Go Live, our questions and answers. My name is Dave Solberg. I am the managing editor of the RV Lifestyle and Repair. And we've got a few questions that have come up here. We're in October now. We got the show season is kind of coming to an end to start with. I am doing a show in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina next week. If anybody's out in that area, I think that they were spared from any of the storm issues that we're going through there. So hopefully we'll have a good show. And then January we fire up again. RV Super Shows has about 15 shows. I'll be at 6 of them, I believe, in the spring, January. We'll be in Chicago and Boston and various places. So if you're in those areas, take a look. We'll be posting them as well. We just did a gold event on winterizing, and unfortunately winter is coming, but we do have about a week of good weather left, and then it's going to dip down. I guess next Tuesday is going to get down below freezing. So, we expect that here. I saw a funny spoof on the weatherman one day. It says today's weather at 6 a.m. will be winter. At 10:30 it will be spring. By 2 o'clock it will be summer. And then it will be 4 o'clock, it'll be fall. And so that's kind of what our weather is like. So anyway, we're going to get to our first question. Steve says he has a Samsung residential fridge. It's cold in the fridge, but the bottom freezer is not. Any suggestions? I am not familiar enough with the residential refrigerators. You know, most of those can't be worked on by an RV dealership. You have to find, and that's one of the challenges with residential refrigerators is that, you know, your Norcolds, your Domestics, the Everchills, the 12-volt stuff is all the service centers have all kind of taken that upon themselves to become certified and to work on them. The residential ones are not. And, some of the new ones that are put in, the manufacturers have they have an agreement with the refrigerator company, but in an absorption refrigerator, you've got the upper section is the freezer, and it's basically pulling heat out of it, and then it's working its way through the cooling unit down to the bottom. So, I don't know with a residential refrigerator how that upper, and you say the fridge is on the bottom, or the freezer is on the bottom, which is how our home one is as well. But I think there's probably 2 different compressors. You didn't give a year, so I don't know how old it is. However, if it's residential, I'm sure it's fairly new because that hasn't been put in a lot in older units. I guess about the only thing I could recommend is to try and find a residential service center that would work on a Samsung in your local area. If your dealer isn't, if you put this in by yourself, through Best Buy or some type of an appliance center, check with them. In some cases, the refrigerator has to be pulled out to be able to get to the rear component. So again, I'm not familiar enough with those type of refrigerators to be much of assistance to you. Sorry about that. So Dave Ogden has said, what is the best way to deal with peeling paper on our cabinets? Should we strip it off or paint over it? So most of the time, if you get peeling paper that's on the cabinet, then you've got what pretty much is called a vinyl wrap. And we see that in a lot of units. Not that it's bad. A lot of people like the vinyl wrap because you have a wood substructure. Most of the time it's MDF, which is a particle board. And you can get moisture in there, condensation, and that's not good. So they will put a wrap. This right here is a wrap. If you take a look at what is on here, this is just a normal, kind of a wallpaper deal that I purchased to put over the top because the wood was rough. So you would have that same kind of thing that's wrapped around the cabinet doors, the frames, and so forth. I wouldn't paint that. If it's peeling right now, you've more than likely got some moisture in there, some condensation. The adhesive has let go of it. I would say it'd probably be best to strip that off. Most of the time you can take that off with a heat gun on a low setting. You don't want to get it too hot and burn it, but you should be able to peel it off. The challenge you'll have after that really is then being able to paint that whatever wood's underneath. My guess it's MDF, particle board, and so you're going to have to do some pretty heavy priming with that and painting. It might be, depending on how many there are, it might be better just to take a look at going to a home improvement store and getting new cabinet doors, just the face of that stuff. And if you get the dimensions of those, you can get just about any kind of custom face built that in the long run, if you're going to do it yourself, and I don't think you would be able to rewrap those. You might. We've got a couple local cabinet shops here that I might be tempted to take something down and say, can you rewrap this? And it depends on the extent of the peeling of the cabinet. So, but by the time you do that, the labor you would have into it and everything might be cheaper just to get new doors and stain them or paint them the way you want. But I would not paint them. I think I would try to strip them off, and then if you paint that, I would go with like a Zinsser bullseye paint and primer, and you can tint those the way you want. Again, I doubt very much you're going to have a solid wood underneath that's stainable. So those are the two different ways that I think I would look at it. Curtis says, can you run 2 roof air conditioners with a soft start on both units on 30 amps and not trip the breaker? The main one is Coleman, 15,000 BTU. Not sure the size of the smaller unit of the bedroom. It's on a 2006 Raptor. So more than likely your bedroom air conditioner is a 13.5 BTU model, a little less. So what he's talking about is when your roof air conditioner starts up, it is going to have an initial startup amp draw of about 45 amps. Now, normally you would think that would trip your 30 amp breaker. It is so quick that they're kind of a slow acting breaker in these, so it won't trip, your 30 amp, which we have right here, a sample of one. And most of the time, your air conditioner, so when you say a 30 amp breaker, or 30 amp will not trip the breaker. So at the campground source, you have 30 amps or 50 amps. And that's what this one is right here. And so that would go to your distribution center, which would be like this one. And so in your distribution center, you're going to have a 30 amp breaker, and then you're going to have a series of breakers for your appliances. Now, this one would happen to be your 20 amp for your rear, and then you would probably have another 20 amp, maybe a 15. Oh, that one broke. That's why that's out. Right, okay. Yep. I don't think I'm going to get that one to pop back in. Nope. Yeah. I got a leg broken on that, but just for demo purposes. So you got a circuit for each one of those, but what he's talking about is if you're on a 30 amp service, then when your air conditioner starts up, it's going to jump initially to 45 amps, and then it's going to draw down, and it'll run anywhere from 8 to 14 amps, which is okay. But you take 2 of them now and you start looking at a 30 amp service. If they both kick in at the same time, normally that's going to be way too much and it's going to trip the breaker. So what a soft start RV does, it's basically just a relay that has thermistors in it. And what they do is they will limit the initial amp draw. And we've done some testing on them. There's a video on the site. You can take a look at it. They will do less than 18 amps at the initial startup. So yes, you can run both roof air conditioners on a 30 amp service with the soft start RV. But you got to keep in mind is that if they're both running at pretty high capacity, and then you have a refrigerator running, or you have your converter from your distribution center is going to run about 9 amps. So you got to do some energy management and see what else is running on that service. Technically, yes, you know, and what the gremlin is, I call it, is that you never know what is running at what time, cycling at what time, you know. So you go out in the campground and you're using some stuff, and all of a sudden you're tripping breakers and whatever is happening. You take it back to the service center, they bring it inside. It's a nice 70 degrees in the service bay. They plug it into a 30 amp service. They turn the one thing on that was tripping the breaker, and wow, look, it works fine. You take it back out to the campground, and oh, all of a sudden here it does it again. So what you have to look at is what is running at those times that you're doing it. So let's say you're on a 30 amp service, you got these two roof air conditioners going. If you have a water heater that is electric, you know, that water heater is going to have a 140-degree temperature sensor, and when it drops down below 120, it's going to kick on. That's called a cycle. So when that kicks on, it's going to draw power, and lots of it with 120 volts. Well, if you're running your two roof air conditioners at the same time, and your converter's trying to charge your batteries, and you know, and your converter will run all the time when you're plugged into shoreline power at 13.2 volts, about 6 amps or so. If the batteries get down below that, and then you plug it in, and it'll run at 13.6 volts, a little higher amp draw. But your water heater kicks on and starts to heat the water in it. Well, you know, if your two roof airs aren't running, that they've conditioned the air, they brought the temperature down, one of them stops, let's say, or both of them stop, and then your water heater kicks in and it doesn't trip anything. Oh, it's fine, it works. But it's that gremlin when all of a sudden you've got 4 or 5 of these components that sometimes work opposite of each other, or not opposite, but, you know, at different intervals. They don't all cycle on and come on at the same time. So you've got different scenarios happening. And if that scenario hits where 2 or 3 of them at the same time go over 30, then you'll trip your breaker. So you're going to have to do some energy management if you're going to run 2 roof air conditioners on a 30 amp service. You can do it, but just know all the other things that are on and what the draw is. I really like then having one of these. And what this will do is we're going to plug this in. This is a surge guard, so it's a surge protector, but it also helps tell me what amp draw I have, because I don't know for sure. So I'm going to plug this in. We'll turn that on. And so it's going to go through, it's about a 2-minute kind of a diagnostics, but what that tells me is it tells me what kind of an amp draw that I've got coming to that pedestal. So you will see when you turn on that air conditioner that this thing will just go whoop initially, and like I said, it's not long enough to trip the breaker, but it will give you that. So you get 2 of them going. Now all of a sudden you're going to get higher. This will allow you to go through and say, okay, I've got right now, and with this one, it's going to be pretty easy. 38. I probably will see about a 2 amp draw out of this, but when I'm using most of my stuff inside, you know, I can see where I'm at, and then I have to realize, okay, am I running the water heater? That typically I would say, if you're going to run both roof airs, don't run the water heater. That will heat it up in about maybe 10 minutes, you know, and you don't want to keep running that all the time. Even on LP, you keep running it all the time. You're using LP, and if you're not taking a shower every 30 minutes, then there's no sense, or washing the dishes or whatever. In my opinion, there's no sense to have that on. So just understand your energy management. I know that we've got several classes and some downloads of what product does have what type of amp draw, power usage. So knowing that will be a big benefit. Linda says, my electric selector does not cause water to get hot. I have to use propane to get hot water. Why? So what I'm assuming is that you have either an Atwood or Suburban 6 or 10 gallon water heater that runs on propane or 120 volt power. And so when you're running it on propane, it has a fire, and we've got one sitting right up here. If we get into, just look and see, it's still only at about 2 minutes. But so when it's running on, there we go. It just came on, 123 volts, 2 amps. So right here, it will tell you what your system is drawing, so you know where your amp draw is at. Okay, so we're going to go back to this. And with the water heater, we have the fire goes right into here, the flame. So you got your gas system going on with this. So if it's working on 100 or on LP, we know it's not the thermostat. We know it's not anything else in there. My guess is that at some point in time, you have turned this on. This is where the heating element would go in. Now, some of them have an on-off switch on the actual unit itself. Yours, it sounds like it's inside somewhere with the selector switch. The first thing I would make sure is, do I have power here? Do I have 120 volts? You should have a circuit breaker on that for your 120 volt side of this. And that would go into your heating element, which is at this point right here. If you have 120 volts here and it's not working, it's your heating element has burned out. And what happens with that is, if you start that water heater up on electric with no water inside that tank, that heating element gets so hot it shorts out in about 30 seconds. And that's pretty common because we flush the system out, we drain it, we winterize it, we start it up in the springtime, we forget that we haven't put the bypass back on yet, and the switch is on, unfortunately, and boom, it's done. So check to make sure you have 120 volt. Check your circuit breaker. You know, you'll have one for your water heater somewhere in your panel, and verify 120 volt back there. And if not, you're gonna have to put in a new heating element. They're not that hard to do. You can get a kit that has the heating element with the wrench. It's just kind of a big socket, and all it is the screw-in type with a metal loop. And you know, it's not hard to do. The hardest part is getting to it sometimes. Sometimes they're in cabinets and you got to really tear apart a lower cabinet to get to it, unfortunately. And we have a new moderator today, Maxwell. We'd like to say thank you for joining us. For those of you that have been with us quite a while, Katie went to Chicago and she's working with the Bulls now. No, I'm just kidding. The Bears. No. So she's got a job out there with a marketing firm, and Maxwell is with us, and we appreciate him joining us. So now we got a download. Let me look and see what we've got. A digital download on how to buy a used RV. So check that out. John has a Norcold double door refrigerator, original to his 2006 motorhome. I had a dealer replace the cooling unit on the back with a new one. It still does not work. It gets a code, NOCO. It does not work on either AC or gas. Of course, whoops, it just shot out. Of course, the longtime dealer just closed up shop without notice. I do have another dealer close by that I have not contacted yet. I am thinking of putting in a residential unit if this one does not work. So, yeah, and that's unfortunate. You know, the original dealer, I'm sure, did something wrong with it. And the no cold is getting, you know, it's hard to tell without going in and verifying that you have, you've got 12 volt coming into it. You've got 120 volt coming into it. Now, both the LP side and the AC side need 12 volt power. So the first thing I would look at is you have a 12 volt fuse in the distribution center that should go to that. You also have a module board in the back of that unit that has, it's just a black power module. And inside there, there's both 120 volt and 12 volt fuses. So check that, because your 12 volt is giving you power to your thermistor, which is your temperature sensor. It's also giving you power to your eyebrow board. So it's very possible, if it's not working on both those modes, it could be something with that 12 volt. It's hard to tell. I would personally, contact a service center that is familiar with the Norcold absorption refrigerators, and just see if you could get maybe an estimate on, it'll probably cost you $100 to have them at least look at it. But if you look at those things first, get that out of the way, so you can verify, and you can walk in and say, okay, here's what I got. They put in this new one. They might be able to have a quick fix for it. I can't tell without looking at it and being able to put a meter on it. Now, the second thing I would look at is, you're talking about maybe putting in a residential unit if this one doesn't work. What I would look at personally is a 12 volt compressor driven one, whether it's the Everchill or Rec Pro has some, Furrion. I've gotten a lot of readers that have put those in, that as long as it's a Danfoss compressor in that 12 volt, then it is very, very efficient. It runs really cold. It's not that expensive. Yeah, your residential one might be a little less expensive if you're going through a discount store, or something like that. But keep in mind, if you're going to buy a residential from those, no dealer will work on it. You got to make sure it'll get through the door. First of all, that is a big one, that a lot of those double door, you said, of course, if a double door, that probably means freezer at the top and refrigerator at the bottom. Those usually will fit in. But we've done some tests on the different residential refrigerators and 12 volts. The residential refrigerator with a 100 amp lithium battery will only last about 12 hours if you're doing some boondocking. If you put in that same 100 amp hour lithium battery with a 12 volt Danfoss, you will get almost 40 hours out of that one battery. If you're plugged in, you don't have to worry about it. But if you're going to do any kind of boondocking, I would really take a look at, what batteries you have in now, what kind of an inverter you have. The inverter is going to be the weakest link. That residential refrigerator, I don't think you'd be very happy with it if you're doing any kind of a dry camping, even overnight. It's not going to last too long. But that would be my recommendation. But look at it first. Check your power sources. Could be something as simple as a fuse. So John, on Facebook, looking for ideas on how to repair my 2015 Shamrock 19 expandable. The bottom of the door handle rail screws have pulled through the sidewall. So typically the sidewall of your unit, I'll show you. They're all pretty generic, and I don't know if your Shamrock has this or not. So the two different ways of building the sidewall is a fiberglass outer skin, a Luan backing, which is just a thin plywood. A lot of companies are going to Azdel now, which Azdel is just a composite rather than Luan. So if you do get moisture inside, it's not going to separate and delaminate, pull apart. Block foam insulation inside like this here. And then periodically you would have aluminum framework. Now, a variation of that in the cheaper units, and I don't know what yours is made of. I'm not familiar with a Shamrock, but it might have a Mesa sidewall, which is ribbed outer sidewall. It might have loose fill insulation instead of the block foam. It might have wood framing instead of aluminum. So there's some variations, but if you had the bottom of the door handrail, screws, so you're just talking about the off to the side, pulled through the sidewall. Okay, what we've done in a lot of cases, something like that, if you want to keep the same handrail that you've got in there, then we've seen it with awning rails at the very bottom too that have pulled out of that, because there's not a lot of structure behind that. And I would venture to say that the screws in that handrail probably just going into that thin luan on the inside of it. What I would recommend is to drill a hole through the entire sidewall and sandwich a piece of metal bracketry, just a flat piece of metal with a hole in it, and then run a bolt through there and bolt that on to the inside. So, you know, instead of, I think I've got one here somewhere. Nope. I never find the things when I need them. Here it is, right here. So let's just say these are longer bolts. You know, so what I would do is take something like this. I would drill a hole all the way through, and then just get a flat piece of metal. You can get them at Home Depot's, Menards, anything like that. You can cut a small piece, drill a hole through it, get a washer on this outside then where your screw typically went, and just make sure that it's long enough to get through. You know, this is a 2-inch here, so you're you probably want to go just a little bit longer than that with a washer on the outside of it. And then when you sandwich that in there, you've got a lot more surface to be able to bring it in, and then just, you know, just take a grinder and grind off the end of the inside of that piece to make it flush in there. Another option that you could do is to get a bigger handrail. So instead of what you have right now, go one that goes down further. MORryde makes a great new handrail that literally telescopes out, but you can't put it on a unit that has the Mesa ribbed sidewall because it's too loose, and you can't have a compartment underneath because the compartment has to open. But that's what I do. I'd sandwich that in there. I think you would be happy with that. Make sure to grab the free gift guide on how to buy an RV. Here's the link to that currently on there. So I don't see any more questions from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our last month's. We had a couple questions that came in September after the fact, and one of them's a great one on oops, how come I lost my September one? Okay, there we go. Five. Okay, so here's one that came in from Joseph that he says, RV roof magic for membrane roofs, what should you use on fiberglass? And what we did is last month we did a sample on our trailer, and we got some RV Roof Magic, which is just an elastomeric coating, and it's one of the best roof materials coatings that I have ever seen. And so we cleaned it off, and it wasn't in real bad shape. It was a little grungy, a little bit of mold and stuff, but we used the fungicide that they had to start with, and then we rolled on this RV Roof Magic, and man, I tell you, it was fantastic. I got the question prior to that from somebody that's the exact same thing. He said, well, what would you do for fiberglass? So I called the company. I talked to my rep out there that had sent me the sample stuff, and he said, you can put RV Roof Magic on anything except PVC. And PVC is normally going to be the Crossflex or the Alpha stuff. And I think most of that is just, it's so slick that there's nothing for it to bond to. But, you know, if you've got anything like TPO or EPDM, which would be the back stuff. So fiberglass, you know, you've got a few options, and it kind of depends on what you want to do with it. The first thing is that fiberglass really is not going to chalk. It's not going to deteriorate like you would the rubber membranes out there. So sometimes putting the roof covering like Dicor or any of that other stuff on the top of that is, if it's just a cosmetic thing, then but if you're starting to get blistering, if you're starting to get pinholing, any kind of peeling, spider cracks, any of that type of stuff, then I would go with the RV Roof Magic on top of it. Otherwise, if you're just looking to restore some of the color to it, I would go with the 303 Protectant. It is a UV protection on it. Phylon, who makes the exterior of most of the smooth panel fiberglass, they're a Crane Composites company. They say a Meguiar's number 59, I believe it is, boat and RV wax. They recommend a polishing compound first to get some of the fading, if that's what you have, and then go with the Meguiar's 59 wax. It does have a UV protection built into it. The biggest thing, in my opinion, is when you're talking about the roof, is to look at the seals, the edges, the front cap to the back. And you don't say what kind of an RV it is, but if it's fiberglass, my guess is that it's probably a motorized. So that front cap that meets the roof material on it is got what's called a J channel. And that is going to move, it's going to flex. And with temperature changes and road vibration, that is one of the most important areas to look at, to make sure that sealant, that lap sealant, is in good condition there. And so Dicor makes a self-leveling lap sealant. I would not use Eternabond in that, especially if you're in hot areas like California, Arizona, that really dries out and starts to crack. And I get right now I have probably about 5,000 emails from readers from here and rvtravel.com. And, it's what works in some areas doesn't work in other areas. And I've had this question come up many times that say, what would you use for a roof seam? And in my opinion, it's get up there, inspect it. If you're seeing it start to pull apart, to crack, take a heat gun and a plastic scraper and get the old stuff off. Be careful with the heat gun. It's not too hot, but just get as much of the old stuff off. It doesn't have to be 100%, and put in some new self-leveling lap sealant. I've had people say, oh, I put a Eternabond, it's lasted for 10 years. It's the greatest thing that's out there. Yeah, and that does happen. But I have just as many people that said I put a Eternabond on, and 2 years later, it's cracked and peeled so bad and I can't get it off. And then now you have a major, major problem. And I've talked to several dealers that have had some of the stuff come in, mostly on, like I said, California, Arizona, places where you've got really hot sun that's going to beat down on those. Out here in the Midwest, we have a few weeks where it gets really hot, but it doesn't get anywhere close to that. And so we don't see the same stuff here. We see it more on the cold side. And so, you will find people say Eternabond's the greatest thing in the world. And yet I know people that say that it's not. So check those sealants, roof, front cap, the roof, side wall, anything around an opening, your skylights, that type of stuff. The sealants are the most important thing, in my opinion. If you're looking at fiberglass and it's just a cosmetic thing, I would wash it off really good with a Dawn dish soap, or the RV Roof Magic has a fungicide that works really, really well. Meguiar's also has a great cleaner. If you have wax on the side of your rig or a ceramic coating, Dawn dish soap will deteriorate, will weaken that up. They don't recommend using Dawn on those because it will thin out petroleum, and that's kind of what that stuff is. So I would be very careful with that. But that's RV Roof Magic. Like I say, I put it on, watch for the videos coming out here. We just got the edit back here this last week, and it was phenomenal stuff. Easy to put on. The hardest part was getting up on the roof and cutting all the edges with a brush at my age. So find somebody younger with good knees and you'll be much happier. So Lisa says, we have a run-in with a tree elbow and our automatic awning It's a 2013 Phoenix Cruiser. They called into Phoenix Cruiser, but they no longer work with that same awning supplier. Any thoughts? And we've seen kind of a shift in awning preferences over the years. For many, many years, it was A&E, the Dometic awning. Everybody was using it. Then Carefree from Colorado came out with an awning, so when some people were using that. Now Lippert has their Solero awning, and frankly, that electric awning, automatic awning that they have, the price is really attractive, and the biggest percentage of people have gone to that. So I would imagine that Phoenix Cruiser has shifted to the Lippert brand, but there still are people out there using the Dometic, the A&E. Find out what brand it is, contact the manufacturer, and just find out, where is a dealer in my area? Where can I get parts? I know you can still get Dometic parts. Carefree of Colorado is based out of Longmont, Colorado area, and they're still providing a lot of stuff out there. So you should be able to find a service center, because Phoenix Cruiser is not going to fix it anyway. Contacting them, they just bought the awning. And so it's not like anybody at Phoenix Cruiser is going to say, oh yeah, I can get you this. They've moved on from that. In fact, usually 2-3 years down the road, they don't even carry parts that they still carry the manufacturer with. So I would recommend getting a hold of Dometic or Carefree, whoever it happens to be. Find out where the supplier is. Most of those you can buy them direct. So if it's something you're looking to get if the tree hit the awning arm, bent the arm, you need a new arm, you need a new cap, you should be able to get that stuff. So that should be easy enough. Okay, so I'm going to come back to October. We have a few more questions. So Walter says, hi, Dave. I have a 2005 Winnebago Aspect 26A. I have been told that the roof is fiberglass. What would you wash the roof with and then to seal it? Second question, my front cap and the radius on both sides is peeling. I believe it's from the sun, and it's a clear coat. What would you suggest to repair that? And he's from New Jersey. So we just talked about that a little bit. The front cap is going to be different than your roof material, because the front cap is actually a molded fiberglass where they have the mold, and they do a chop gun where they actually shoot the fiberglass fiber. So they'll put a gel coat in first, which is a clear coating, and then they shoot the fiberglass inside rather than getting the sheets like your rooftop material would have. So what's happening on your front cap is that clear coat is getting UV degradation. It is starting to deteriorate. I'm sure it's clouding even, and most of that stuff is, the color is inherent to the fiberglass material that's going in. It's not painted. What most of it, and Phylon has a procedure too, because you will get a fading, you will get a discoloration, cloudiness out of some of the even the fiberglass panels that are on the roof or on the sidewall. And so what they recommend is Meguiar's has a polishing compound, and I've used Barkeeper's Friend in the past, a light polishing compound, anything that has a light grit to it, and you can go in and buff out that front cap and restore that the gel coat, it's called, which is a clear coat, and depending on how far it's gone. And then you would want to go back with the Meguiar's 59, and it's a marine and RV wax that would give you protection and UV protection on top of it. So that's what I would do with the front cap. And then for washing, we just talked a little bit earlier, Dawn dish soap is still really good to use, in my opinion. Otherwise, I would go with a Meguiar's. You can do the RV Roof Magic fungicide. You have to buy that and get it shipped. The Meguiar stuff, you can go to, I think even Walmart carries it, but it's the ceramic. Let me do a real quick, I want to make sure I get the right one here. Oh, come on. And I came across this by mistake, actually, I've been a Dawn dish soap advocate for years and years, and my wife just got an Audi and got a clear coat, ceramic coating put on it, and a very expensive one. And it really looks nice. It's great. Vincent did a great job with it. I was not a big fan of him before that, but it looked great. So I asked him, I said, well, Vincent, what do I wash this with? Because he was pretty particular. You got to refresh it and use this. And he's got a special Meguiar's. There we go. He's got a special product that he's used for a long, long time. But what he recommends, if you don't use that one, is to, so here it is. It's Meguiar's hybrid ceramic wash and wax. And so they have just a wash. And so the wash and wax, what it does is it washes and it refreshes if you have a wax in it. But so if you get the Meguiar's, and let me back up to ceramic wash and wax. Most of it shows wash and there's others out there, Armor All and stuff like that. But this is the one that he really recommended. So it's the hybrid Meguiar's. And Meguiar's seems to be pretty much the choice of classic car enthusiasts, of paint shops, of this fiberglass. And so I would definitely use that if you have a wax on the side of the unit. But then also Meguiar's 59, I believe it is. Marine RV. Yeah. They've got a quick wax and a paste wax. So the Meguiar's 59 product has UV protection built into it. And then they also, like I say, have the polishing compound. So those are the things that I would recommend. Okay. All right. And I do not see. Okay, so we don't have any more questions that came up, but I do have one topic I want to talk about a little bit that just happened here recently, and I don't think we've addressed it in any of the live events. In fact, I know we haven't because it happened just a few weeks ago. Okay, so Terry on Facebook says, what's a good quality rear video setup to see behind the RV while towing? And I really like the Furrion product. It's the Lippert has it. One of the things you got to be careful is when you put a camera in the back, and so you're towing behind the RV, you're going to do wireless. Pretty much is the only way, unless you're looking for something in a motorhome that's coming up front, but it looks like you're while towing. So what I like about the Furrion system is there's less interference, and it's got a stronger signal and amplifiers. And what happens is when you put a camera on the back of it, and you're going to get your power feed to come into it, but then usually it's going to go wireless up to the actual monitor that's in your dash. So depending on how far away that is, you could get some good interference from that. And you get interference when you're traveling down the road from cell phone towers. Real big interference when you go through any place that has radar cameras. Or traffic cameras and stoplight areas with those traffic cameras in there, because there's just all kinds of stuff going on. And all the tests that I've seen and all the product that I've seen, the Furrion system, they put it on a fifth wheel and drove the truck like 250 feet away, and it was still working. And from the readers that I've talked to and the surveys we've done, Furrion seems to be one of the best that's out in the market by far. There's other good ones out there too. I would ask for some test data on them. Check out some of the forums, but like I say, I'm a big fan of the Furrion one that's out here. So I rent office space here from somebody that just bought the property, and back behind us was a huge shed that was just stored with all kinds of stuff from construction previous owner. They gutted it out, and he built 6 man caves back there, storage caves, and each one of them is about 40 foot wide by, I would say, at least 60 or 70 feet, and completely renovated, put heaters in and all new electronics. And by code, the electricians said that they had to put a GFCI circuit breaker on the actual panel. And, if it's a campground source outside, they can still get by with this old system like this. You see that in here there's the regular circuit breaker, that there's no GFCI. We're all familiar with the ones that like this one right here, that has the test button that you see in the 120 volt stuff. Well, these now have to have the GFCI. Anything that's inside, enclosed, and you're going to be plugging into a 30 or 50 amp, have to have a GFCI breaker. So I get a frantic call from the new owner of the building that he's got 2 motorhomes that have rented space inside, and the motorhome's tripping the GFCI breaker. So my first thought was, okay, what do you have plugged in? The guy had a Winnebago View, which is a Mercedes chassis, Class C cutaway, 30 amp, running in fact, that is his Safeguard power protector. And so he's got an adapter. He's going from 50 amp, like we see up on the top on this one here, plugging into the 50 amp circuit on the outlet on the wall. It has a GFCI at the circuit board. He's got the adapter. He's got the surge guard here, which is 30 amp surge guard. And I'm thinking, how do you trip a breaker if you've got a 30 amp service and you're plugging into a 50 amp? My first thought was that, okay, they wired them wrong. A 30 amp circuit has a hot leg, a neutral, and a ground. A 50 amp circuit has hot 1, hot 2, so left and right, and a ground and a neutral. And a lot of times you get somebody that wants to hook it up like a dryer or a welding machine, and they hook it to 240 amps. So they bring both of them in, and we have problems. So we came in here, we walked through it with the electrician. We unplugged everything in there, and we thought, okay, let's find out exactly what he's drawing. And he was drawing like 5 amps, because this will tell you how many amps you're drawing when you plug something into that. And he was only drawing like 5 amps. So I went inside the RV and I looked, and he had the refrigerator was off. None of the circuit breakers were off. So I don't know for sure if the electric water heater was on or not on, but I did some research. I talked to one of the most experienced certified electricians for the RVs that I know is Mike Sokol. And so Mike sent me a link to an article he wrote about these new GFCIs. They are so sensitive that a 0.5 milliamps will set them off. And in houses, it works fine, because all the appliances in houses are going through UL approved. They're going through Intertech testing. They're all running very efficient, and they're not leaking voltage. Because what a GFCI does is, you will naturally have some voltage from an appliance that will leak and make its way back. So, and I don't pretend to be an electrician, so it supposedly makes its way back. A small amount is acceptable. It gets over 0.5 milliamps, and like, we can't accept that. So it does the breaker. From what Mike tells me is that all the appliances in RVs, we get a lot of stuff that comes from overseas. We get a lot of stuff that some of them actually have the ground and neutral together. I don't know what that means, so I'm not even going to go any further to it. But the whole idea is that they are not running as efficient. They're getting some more leakage coming back to these GFCIs. It's going to be a real problem when we have to start putting these things in and we want to run stuff. So what we did is we looked at, you're not running anything else in there. I called Winnebago also, and I said, here's the view, here's our setup. He said that motorhome was a 2015 View. So this is at least a 2015 surge guard. And he said after about 6 years, they have just enough fluctuation in them, And we noticed that with this one when we plugged it in after 2 minutes, when it went through all its diagnostics and finding things, we heard this click, and then it came on and said, here's the voltage and here's the stuff. So what my contact at Winnebago said was, we tell people when you have something like that, it's older than 5 years, get rid of it. Now, I don't know if that, I hate swapping out parts, but the minute we took that off, it stopped having problems. So let me just show you here. I'm going to shut this off. I'm going to unplug this. I'm going to plug it back in. Okay. And so when I plug this in, you notice it says firmware. It tells me what the firmware update is. It tells me how many seconds. It's caution when it's going through evaluation of that 30 amp circuit. Well, outside, what was happening is it's going through the evaluation of the 50 amp back from the outlet back to the circuit breaker, and it was tripping the circuit breaker. So once we took that off, it stopped the problem. Now, we started digging a little further into it and saying, okay, what else could possibly be doing some of this stuff? He had 2 batteries in there that were 2021 Napa flooded lead acid batteries. What we also noticed is that when we came in to the, I'm trying to find I just had it. Where did I put it? Sorry about that. Somewhere I have an LP leak detector. So my Winnebago source said also that when we walked in and the circuit breaker had tripped, that meant the battery charger, the converter inside that unit, stopped working, and overnight those batteries were dead, and the LP leak detector was chirping. And I want to find that. Where did I put it? That is amazing. I have too many places for things. So this is the old model, and it's got a stamp on it, September 4th, 2019. And when I asked him about it, he says, well, that is what their recommended replacement. This is a 2015 that's in there. And so what happened is our batteries are sulfated, and when the batteries so we just heard that click. Now that just took 2 minutes of diagnosing and all this stuff, and that clicking, that could be just enough to send back to that GFCI to say, uh-oh, we had 0.5 milliamps. That's very, very minor. So the recommendation was replace the LP leak detector, first of all, because it was beeping even when we plugged the unit back in with good power. It just didn't have enough. It was weak enough that it didn't have the amps showing up that it would work correctly. So now we got batteries that are sulfated. And what happens with that is that you've got a converter inside your RV that is a charger. So you plugged into shoreline power, that's going to do 13.6 volts when a battery is low until the battery gets up to 12.6, and then it's going to drop down to 13.2 to maintain all the time, constantly. So that's going to be drawing about, that was where the 5 amps were drawing. But so those batteries have a tendency to kind of float a little bit when they're sulfated. So that goes back to there. The batteries are going to move up. So another thing that could be happening is that battery fluctuation is making that converter kind of kick on, kick off, kick on, kick off a little bit, or adjust the voltage into it. And that could be just enough of a voltage leak again in all this stuff. And I call them gremlins. You never know what's cycling at what point in time. And then the last thing that he recommended, and we have not done this yet because I shut it off, but if that water heater was on and the heating element was burned out in that and it was trying to cycle, that would kick that off as well, because a shorted water heater element's going to draw too much power. So Those were all the little gremlins we came across. You might find some of this stuff. I would work, what we ended up doing is our gentleman that plugs in, all he wanted to do was charge his batteries. And so we said, why are you plugging in here and letting your converter run all the time to do that? Get a small little desulfation maintainer converter, plug that into the 120 volt outlet on the side of the wall, leave everything else in your RV off. And then you don't have to worry about it. And it will condition your batteries. We are putting in new batteries. We kind of walked through with how he wants to RV. He doesn't boondock much at all. He put in these 2 Napa batteries back in 2021 because that's what Winnebago had in there. They use Napa quite often. We are going to go to an AGM battery, which is absorbed glass mat. We looked at lithium, but if he's not going to boondock much, you're going to pay way too much money for lithium, and you can't just stick lithium into a battery configuration that had flooded lead acid. You have to look at charging profiles. That converter is going to do 13.6 and then drop to 12.2, or excuse me, 13.2 when the batteries hit 12.6. Lithium batteries want 14.4 to 14.6. We have a sample of one right here. And this has no guts inside because I'm not that strong, but you see this one, and it says right on here, 12.8 profile, 14.6. I'm sure it's hard to see, but right there, charge voltage is 14.6, and these are for about 2 hours. So unless you have a converter that can be adjusted, like one of these that we put in right here, this is a Progressive Dynamics 9000 series, and it is set up for lithium. And you can see by the different charge profiles. Now this one, you would have to literally go in and, what did I do with the little tab? So it's got a tab that I'm going to have to go find. But you push this, and it will set it to flooded lead acid, which will do, it doesn't say on this one. Flooded lead acid will do 13.6 for 8 hours. AGM batteries will do 14.2 for the same amount of time. And lithium ion batteries will do 14.6 for 2 hours. So it can be programmed exactly the charge profile that you need. The other thing you have to, so, you buy lithium batteries and you've got the old charger, you're only going to get about 60%. So you're going to waste a lot of that charging, or the money that you paid for. You don't want to charge the lithium batteries up below freezing temperatures unless you have some kind of a heater for that. And that would mean a battery isolation manager. So there's a lot of things to look at. He doesn't boondock that much. He doesn't want to put a new thing in. Those AGM batteries will not sulfate, and they will give him on a 200 amp hour, they'll give him 100 amp hours. He can go probably about 2 days with what he has. So with that, we're running out of time. I appreciate everybody coming out, and we will see you in the next quarter. Again, if anybody's around the Myrtle Beach area, going to the show where I'm doing seminars there, and we'll be hitting it again in January, starting with Chicago in the, I think the 10th of January, and then going to Boston, the first time for me out there. So with that, thank you for joining us.